The actors are on strike. Again. When I saw an email from my union saying that SAG-Aftra was on strike again, it caught me by surprise. I thought the drama was over with the SAG-Aftra WGA strikes that we had last summer, but apparently one major portion of the acting community didn't get their well-deserved justice. Video game actors. Voiceover actors and performers that bring some of your favorite video game characters to life are at war with some of the biggest gaming companies in the world. And today I'm going to talk about everything that's going on. My name's Makayla, and over on this channel I make film school and film industry content. I would love to have you here, so be sure to subscribe and let's get into the drama. I'm going to briefly recap the previous strike that we had last summer, SAG-Aftra and WGA strikes. Last year, the unions went on strike because during negotiations, they couldn't come to a deal with major film and television studios. I even attended some of those strikes myself. Those strikes were mainly to demand increased pay, negotiate streaming residuals, and to create regulations on AI. But if you want a full in-depth look at the previous strikes, I have multiple videos on those. I also have videos on how that strike is now affecting Hollywood today and performers, and how it's created a contraction in Hollywood. But if you subscribed, you would already know what's going on. But that's in the past. Let's talk about the strike now. On July 26th, all SAG-Aftra members, including myself, got an email from the union saying that, quote, SAG-Aftra is calling a strike against many video game companies. All SAG members that perform voiceover, motion capture, or other work for video games must strike on certain struck games. I'll explain what a struck game is later in the video. The official name for the strike is the interactive media strike, but people are also calling it the video game strike because video game companies are the main producers of interactive media. Okay, I get the definitions, I get the name, I get that there's some conflict, but why is this even happening? As you guys know, SAG-Aftra renegotiates contracts with different companies every few years. Since October 2022, SAG-Aftra and other major video game companies have been negotiating the issues of regulating AI. Oh my gosh, that's just always what it comes back to, isn't it? Even though some smaller issues were resolved in the negotiating process, the main issue was AI. Then, in November 2022, the Interactive Media Agreement expired. According to SAG-Aftra, the Interactive Media Agreement offered critical AI protections for over 2,600 voice actors, motion capture actors, and stunt workers a part of SAG who work on video games. So tensions were growing after the agreement expired because video game companies were, quote, refusing to plainly affirm in clear, enforceable language that they will protect all performers covered by this contract in their AI language. Then, in September of 2023, SAG-Aftra members approved a video game strike authorization with a 98% yes vote. So SAG negotiating back and forth with these companies for a year and a half and ultimately reaching no deal is what spurred the strike that we're seeing going on right now. So in order to understand how the strike is operating, I just want to briefly go over IMAs again. That's the Interactive Media Agreement. There are a lot of different IMA contracts, but essentially if a video game company wants to produce a game with a SAG-Aftra actor, SAG-Aftra makes the company sign an IMA. The IMA contract that they're asked to sign essentially lay out that they're not going to steal the actor's voice or face, and it's going to ensure certain protections for the performer before they actually work on the project. And some video game productions didn't want to sign SAG-Aftra's IMAs. So what companies are the actors striking against? So on SAG-Aftra's website, it says that it's easier to think of the strike in terms of struck games versus struck companies. Because, quote, some companies will have both struck games and games that cannot be struck due to certain terms, which I'll talk about. So essentially, SAG-Aftra members that were working on projects that were in development prior to September of 2023, aka the date where the vote to strike was initiated, if they were already on that project before everybody voted yes to strike, they can still work on that video game. Or if a game is willing to sign an IMA for an actor to get them on the project, that game is now not a struck game for the actor. They're now in a certain tiered IMA. Gets kind of complicated. So technically some actors are still allowed to work during the strike. It all comes down to if the game has a signed IMA. So which games are struck games? In order to know which games you can and can't work on, you'll have to look it up on the video game status search on SAG-Aftra's website. I'll leave the link to their official website down below. However, if you don't want to take the time to look up specific games, you can just refer to a list of companies that produce the games that SAG-Aftra is striking against. Some of these major companies include Activision Productions Incorporated, Incorporated. They produce all of the Call of Duty video games. Electronic Arts Productions Incorporated, and they produce major sports games like Madden NFL, FIFA, and PGA Tour, and also Warner Brothers Games Incorporated. And they've done the Mortal Kombat games and also the Harry Potter game. So when it comes to video games, what is an actor's role in the production process? What are some of the different jobs? The first one that comes to mind for me are voice actors. Voice actors go into a studio with different microphones and soundproof walls, and they record lines for the video game to make the character come to life and make the world feel real. I mean, think about whenever you've played a video game. Usually you as the player are interacting with other characters in this world, and sometimes you're also choosing your own adventure. So voice actors have to record lines for different outcomes that the player might choose, and they'll have to channel different emotions based on whatever you choose as the player. Different video games also have a lot of action, so voice actors have to have a lot of range. Maybe they'll have to give an emotional monologue about their character's backstory so that you understand more about the world of the game, or they'll have to yell and grunt when they're pretending they're in a big action sequence. And they can't show their face or their body when they're performing. They can only convey that emotion through their voice, which is a very specific talent. They're doing multiple takes of different lines, different outcomes, different alts that the writers are giving them, because in video games there's so many different outcomes. But there are also some performers who get to show their face and get to use motion capture for their performances. Motion capture is a cutting-edge technology that digitally records an actor's or an object's movement and can actually map those movements onto a 3D model in a computer. It's pretty crazy. The actors will stand in a room, usually with different like balls on them, but they're all like mapping points that these different cameras can capture as they're going through their performance with their body. There's usually a mic recording their voice, but motion capture can record an actor's likeness digitally. According to the New York Times, the most advanced motion capture technology can replicate a furrowed brow or crinkled cheeks, such extreme amounts of detail. And a lot of celebrities are actually moving into the video game space because there is motion capture and they're able to do cameos in some large games. I'm pretty sure Homelander was in Mortal Kombat. Homelander is literally my phone screen and he has been for a year. He's in Mortal Kombat. I don't know if he did motion capture, but that is a celebrity cameo. Here's some other examples of celebrity cameos on video games. According to the New York Times, Cameron Monaghan, guys, we already know I'm bad with names, led Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Megan Fox portrayed a character in Mortal Kombat 1, and Idris Elba and Keanu Reeves provided the backbone of Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty. I don't know how lucrative the video game space is, but it seems to be if it's attracting all of these celebrities that I assume have large rates for their cameos. A lot of these celebrities believe that there is an audience for these video games, and their performances on these games could outlive maybe their performances that they do on film. Here's a quote from David Harbour from Stranger Things, who's working on a video game called Alone in the Dark. It's a horror game. He says, quote, "I hope people are still watching 2-hour movies a decade from now, but I know they will be playing video games." But I do know that a lot of producers in Hollywood view video games as precious IP sources that they can milk TV and films out of, because gamers are a dedicated audience that show up for adaptations. Take for example, The Last of Us. That started as a very popular video game and got adapted into a popular TV show on Max. And if you're an actor that worked on the original video game, there's a chance that you could be put on the show so you can have more work opportunities in the future. This happened for Merle Dandridge, who played Marlene in the video game. Out of all the characters from The Last of Us that appear in the show, Merle Dandridge is the only character to play the same person. So what is SAG-Aftra hoping to get out of the strike? They mainly want to come to an agreement on AI. SAG wants to prevent gaming studios from taking SAG actors' voices, bodies, and faces. Because when you think about it from the studio perspective, it's easier to just clone an actor's voice so that if they want to change certain lines or create a new script, they don't have to bring the actor in and pay them for their time in the studio, recording with a mic and maybe renting out a soundproof room. Instead, they have their likeness digitally and they can do whatever they want with it a million times and not have to pay them. So SAG wants to require video game producers to obtain consent from video game actors whenever they want to use AI to replicate them. And the union wants to ensure that they're being fairly compensated whenever this is done. Quote, "SAG-Aftra members who bring game characters to life deserve and demand the same fundamental protections as performers in film and television, the fair compensation, and the right of informed consent for the AI use of their faces, voices, and bodies." Protection for actors against AI is critical because the union fears that unregulated use of AI poses an equal or even greater threat to performers in the video game industry more than it does for actors in the film and television industry. This is because it's easier now more than ever to cheaply and convincingly create a digital replica of an actor's voice and likeness. AI replication also creates issues around actors' bodily autonomy. The Guild said in a Deadline article that, quote, "These vital protections are not only righteous and fair, but necessary to counter the existential threat to members posed by unregulated use of AI. After all, who besides you should own your voice and image?" Aside from AI protections, here's some other things SAG-Aftra hopes to gain: wage increases to keep up with inflation, more rest time for actors' vocal health, and on-set medics for hazardous jobs. Now that we heard SAG-Aftra's side, let's hear why maybe game studios are justified in their position. 1, cost, because that's what it always comes down to. AI allows animators to generate numerous assets, like background characters, props, clothing, extremely quickly. All of the asset generation is expensive when it's done manually, because those small assets are not a major part of the game. For example, hiring a ton of background performers. Whereas companies would rather spend the money hiring a top-tier performer for the game's main characters. Plus, AI can adapt and change an actor's previous performance for other sequels in the future, so they don't need to renegotiate a new contract with performers or go through the trouble of bringing them back to the studio. Quote, "The rise of generative AI in gaming is an attempt to control costs and find more effective methods of distribution. AI adoption is more widespread and significantly shortening the time and resources required to create new and derivative game content." 2, efficiency. Like I said, AI reduces production time, and it speeds up the production of certain animation processes, so it's just more efficient for studios working in tight budgets and timelines. Sean Cooper, the technical director at Diddymo, I don't know. It's a company that builds tools to create NPCs in game worlds. He says that, quote, "AI has always allowed developers to be more efficient and has also been a boon for studios that lack the financial firepower to hire staff for their games." 3, technical flexibility. Companies are constantly trying to stay innovative with their game storylines and world building. So AI can create interactive content that changes in real time. So it really enhances the relationship between the game and the player. For example, if a player is in conversation with an actor in the video game, based on whatever choice the player makes, the AI can generate various dialogue options in that moment rather than having to hire an actor to come and recite the dialogue.
Dang, dude, when's the last time you got a haircut?
I actually just got one last week. Maybe it wasn't good enough.
I mean, it's not really my taste, but I guess if it works for you.
What do you mean it's not your taste? Do I look bad?
4, consistency and intellectual property. Now that we have better technology and games with larger, more complex worlds, AI ensures that there's consistency in character performances for games with bigger universes that can be hard to keep up with. Forbes says, quote, "AI can quickly create large digital environments, handle complex data, and simulate realistic environmental effects. These expansive digital realms rely on AI to manage vast amounts of data and coordinate interactions between players. The depth of these games would be very difficult without AI's computational power and data management capabilities." Studios that have already created these AI-generated performances argue that they should maintain control over that digital asset to protect their investment. As you can see, AI is a great tool for video game studios, and AI should be used in that industry because it makes things less labor-intensive for the crew members working on those projects. But when it comes to the actors portion, that side needs to be addressed with AI, and there do need to be some regulations on their performance and their likeness and what studios are allowed to use from that. But I don't think that studios should not be allowed to use AI in general. And they've used it in the past, so it's not new, but it's just in the relationship with actors and the production of these games. That's where it gets a little bit tricky. Actions SAG-Aftra is taking with its members. In the email sent out to SAG members, they asked us to post about the strike on social media, sign a letter of support, and also respond to digital and in-person calls to action. There's also some pickets that have started. There was just a picket outside of Warner Brothers Games in Los Angeles on August 1st. There's also a ton of resources on SAG-Aftra's website. Here's my final thoughts. On the actors side, we've seen that AI has become sort of like a feared tool within the industry, but we also saw that with the WGA strikes and the threat to writers' jobs. But on some of the crew side, I've heard that AI is actually a really valuable tool for them. I was recently listening to Script Notes, and Mike Schur from The Good Place was actually talking about how they used AI to fix an audio error with the actors and some background noise, which saved them a lot of time and money because they would have had to reshoot the whole scene. And I can definitely see where the companies are coming from with with their AI use as well. That's something that they need, but I also think that they need to consider the rights of performers as well. But I definitely understand the fear that was invoked in performers during the last strike, and just overall in the whole industry, it was set up as a thing that should be really feared. But I do think over time, because I was like, I really didn't like AI. I still don't. I don't really use it at all in my personal life, actually. But I do think that it is valuable in some aspects of creating entertainment, but I also think it needs strict regulations or else it can be taken advantage of. I also heard in a recent Colin and Samir video that companies were buying data sets from YouTube videos and from creators like me, are transcripts to train AI, and I'm not getting paid for that. There are a lot of problems that can arise from AI, but there's also a lot of solutions that can come from AI. It's just we're in the early days and it's really hard to regulate it right now, but things like this are important. Regulating it right now is important so that we're protected in the future. And I think even though there's a lot of gripes right now about how the strike has caused a contraction in Hollywood. Again, you can go watch my previous video on that. I do still think it was important to have the strike because without it, we as film and television actors would not have those AI protections or other basic minimums that we needed, even writers too. That was needed, and that is also going to help us in negotiations in the future. A lot of people are also saying that the contraction right now was something that was building up over a long time. Again, there's different opinions on this, but I do think that this strike is important. And as a SAG-Aftra member, I do stand with my union. So be sure to subscribe. I might hit the picket lines after I move in to school, which is gonna be a whole stressful thing. Because I do wanna support the voice actors. It is a job. And I see a lot of people commenting that acting and performing or just working in entertainment in general is not a real job. We're trying to monetize our hobbies, but this is real life for some people, and some people don't want to spend their whole lives working in an office or in a cubicle, and they want to do what they love. I personally think that it is a hard job to have. It's definitely not a stable job, but it is a job. You might not be working all the time. I do recommend having plan Bs if you're starting out and it's a whole other thing. I have videos on this, guys. I don't want to take up too much of your time, okay? Y'all who do not know about the industry or understand what it's like to work in the industry, it is something only people in the industry will understand and value. People who don't get it will never get it unless they actually take the time to learn about it. So, I mean, look, it makes me mad because people say all this stuff and like, wow, you guys are getting mad, Makayla. Not you guys getting mad, Makayla. This is what the strikes do. They make me mad. Just be respectful of people's professions because it is a profession, it is a craft, and don't devalue something when you don't know about it or don't make the effort to research into it. That's all I'm gonna say about that because that gets me fired up and mad. But I mean, I can give my opinion, but if y'all really think it's not a profession, let me know down below. I mean, I wanna hear it. I do read the comments. She's getting mad. Let me know your thoughts about this whole situation with a new strike that's coming up during a contraction period in Hollywood. Leave your comments down below. If you want more videos about the film industry, whether that's acting, screenwriting, or commentaries, or even film school and my journey trying to make it in Hollywood, be sure to subscribe to this channel. But if you stay till the end of this YouTube video, y'all know we gotta do the end of the video keyword. And what is the keyword? I don't know yet. Mapping. I don't know, because motion capture. Like mapping. I don't know. Maybe that's a dumb one, but that's the word. Comment mapping down below so I know you stayed till the end of this video. And I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye!